I never meant to buy a spaceship. That part still makes me laugh, even now, sitting in the cockpit of the Aldebaran Queen with a mug of instant coffee and the whole quiet dark of space outside the window. I meant to buy a second-hand cargo hauler, something solid and sensible, just big enough to carry freight between stations and make me my own boss for the first time in 41 years of following other people's rules. What I got instead was a dented wreck with a broken navigation array, an engine that wheezed like an old man climbing stairs, and, as it turned out, 2 stowaways hiding in the aft cargo bay. But I am getting ahead of myself. My name is Darrow Finch. I spent 20 years as a maintenance mechanic on Callista Station, a mid-ring trading hub sitting in the outer belt between nothing and nowhere important. I was good at my job. I could read a faulty power coupling the way some people read a face. One look, and I knew exactly what was wrong and exactly how to fix it. But the station changed hands. The new owners brought in automated systems, and one morning I found a severance envelope under my workshop door and 3 months to figure out the rest of my life. 3 months felt like a lot at the time. It turned out to be exactly enough time to make a reckless decision. The Aldebaran Queen was sitting at the edge of the salvage yard on the outer dock. Every sane buyer had walked past her. She was ugly, broad across the middle, patched in 4 different colors of hull plating, with one landing strut slightly shorter than the others, so she leaned to the left, like a person with a sore hip. The dealer wanted almost nothing for her. I paid it without negotiating, which tells you everything about the state of my judgment that week. The first 2 days, I did not sleep so much as I worked. I pulled panels, checked circuits, tightened joints. The engine was fixable, loud, but honest. The life support was solid. The navigation array was a bigger problem, but I figured I could patch it enough to get from station to station while I saved for a proper replacement. By the 3rd evening, I felt something I had not felt in a long time, like something belonged to me. Then I woke at 3 in the morning to a sound that was not mechanical. It was breathing, not mine. Lower, slower, coming from somewhere behind the inner wall of the aft cargo bay. I lay still for a long moment, listening. I told myself it was the ship settling, the way old structures do in the cold of space. I almost believed it. Then it came again, a soft exhale, and something that might have been a small shifting of weight. I got up, I dressed. I did not take a weapon because I did not own one, and also because whatever was breathing back there was doing it quietly and carefully, which suggested it was more afraid of me than I was of it. I walked to the cargo bay slowly. I stopped outside the hatch and spoke aloud, to no one in particular, in a steady and calm voice. I said that I was not going to hurt anyone. I said I was going to open the door slowly, and I would keep my hands where they could be seen. Then I did exactly that. She came at me before the hatch was fully open. I have thought about that moment many times since, and every time I think about it I am grateful for 2 things. First, that I reacted by dropping to the floor, rather than by fighting back. Second, that I did not scream. She was Keth. I knew the species by sight. Everyone on the station did, because Keth traders passed through occasionally, and they were hard to miss. They stood roughly my height, but were built differently, with 4 long limbs, a narrow torso, and a bioluminescent strip that ran along each forearm from wrist to elbow. In most circumstances, that strip glowed a faint blue-green, the way calm water looks at night. In that moment, hers was blazing white, which I later learned meant something like the highest possible alarm. She was on top of me in less than a second, and she was making a sound that I can only describe as what a thunderstorm would sound like if it were personally angry at you. I lay flat on the floor and looked past her shoulder. There, crouched behind a large shipping crate, was a child. Small, probably not yet 2 years old in whatever counting the Keth used. With wide eyes the color of deep amber and tiny fingers wrapped around the corner of the crate so tightly that the knuckles were pale. The child was staring at me, not with anger, with the specific and heartbreaking expression of something very small that has been waiting to be found out and is terrified of what happens next. I stopped moving entirely. I looked at the child. Then I looked up at the mother. I said, very quietly, "I'm not going to hurt either of you." She did not believe me. I could see it in every line of her body, but she did not move either. She waited. That was enough to start with. Her name was Vel. The child was Pip. We did not exchange introductions that first night. She retreated to the far side of the bay when I stepped back, and I went and made a meal, and left half of it outside the bay door without comment. The way you might leave food for a neighbor who is having a hard time and doesn't want to talk yet. When I checked an hour later, the bowl was empty. I did the same the next morning, and the next evening. I worked on the engine during the day and pretended I had not noticed 2 extra beings sharing my ship. I left the water access unlocked. I did not ask questions. I let time do the work. On the second day, Pip started watching me through the gap in the cargo bay door. Just watching. I kept my movements slow and my voice low, and I narrated what I was doing while I worked. Not because I thought he understood me, but because silence felt heavier than it needed to. On the third day, Vel spoke. Her standard was rough and halting but precise. She chose each word carefully, the way someone picks a path across uncertain ground. She told me she was Keth. I said I knew. She told me the Keth had no recognized homeworld under Galactic Compact law. I said I had heard that, though I did not know the details. She looked at me for a long moment, as if deciding how much to say, and then she told me the details. The Keth were what the Compact called a displaced species. No territory, no legal status, no right of settlement on any registered world. In practical terms, this meant they lived on ships, on stations in the cheapest sections, on the margins of every place they stopped. It also meant they were easy to exploit, because people without legal standing had no real protection. A man named Haddon had been running an operation out of the lower docks of Callista for years, collecting Keth and selling them to biotech labs that wanted access to certain properties of Keth biology. Vel had been hiding on the station for months with Pip, moving between storage bays and maintenance corridors, always one step ahead. When Haddon's people swept the station in a coordinated search, she had 20 minutes to find somewhere to go. My ship was the last bay still unlocked. She had been waiting for me to find them, she said. She had been fully prepared for what she assumed would come next. She did not say what she had assumed would come next. She did not have to. I sat with that for a long time. Outside the porthole, the stars were doing what stars always do, which is, exist calmly and without any opinion about the things happening below them. I thought about 20 years of fixing things on a station I no longer worked on. I thought about a severance envelope and 3 months, and one reckless decision. I thought about a bowl of food left outside a door, and the specific courage it takes to eat it when you do not trust the person who left it. Then I asked Vel if she knew anything about navigation arrays, a face against. She stared at me, then she said yes. As a matter of fact, she did. Her tone suggested she found the question mildly offensive in its underestimation of her. We had 4 more days of careful, quiet travel before the problem found us. I was in the cockpit when the tow clamp locked onto my hull. The sound of it is unmistakable. A deep metallic clunk that travels through the whole frame of the ship and sits in your teeth. A face appeared on my comm screen. He was calm and well-dressed, and he introduced himself without any warmth whatsoever. He said his name was Haddon. He said he knew I had his property aboard. He said he was a reasonable man and preferred simple solutions. I looked at Vel, who had heard every word from the doorway. She was already moving, guiding Pip toward the rear of the ship, giving me a clear path, giving me the option to hand them over and walk away clean. I turned back to the screen. I said I would need a moment to think it over. Haddon said he was a patient man. I closed the comm channel. I thought about it for approximately 4 seconds. Then I went down to the engine room. Here is something about working on machinery for 20 years. You learn which rules matter, and which rules are really just suggestions, written by people who have never been in a tight situation. The tow clamp Haddon's ship had locked onto my hull was an older model, the kind that interfaces with a ship's systems through a standard docking port. The same port that connected to my engine's pressure release valve. Not the same system, not designed to interact, but with about 40 minutes of very focused work and several cable configurations that would make any certified engineer cover their eyes, they could be made to interact in a very specific and very inadvisable way. I ran the engines to 140% for 11 seconds. The clamp released. That is the polite way to describe it. The less polite way is that it left my hull at considerable speed and took a piece of Haddon's port strut with it. His ship spun. His systems scrambled. By the time he had any kind of control back, I had put 2,000 kilometers between us and was moving fast toward the nearest relay beacon. 3 hull panels fell off the Queen during the maneuver. The engine sounded worse than ever. One of the landing strut connectors cracked, which meant the lean to the left was now more pronounced. I stood in the middle of the cockpit and looked at the damage report on the screen and felt, genuinely, completely, unambiguously fine about all of it. Vel appeared in the doorway. She looked at the damage report. She looked at me. She said, with a tone that was somewhere between disbelief and reluctant respect, that humans were absolutely out of their minds. I said probably yes. I asked if she still felt like fixing the navigation array. She fixed it in 4 hours. She fixed it better than it had ever been, better than the original factory specification, because it turned out that Keth have an instinctive understanding of magnetic field geometry that makes them extraordinary at anything involving signal and direction. She was mildly annoyed the whole time, muttering under her breath about the quality of the components, which I took as a sign that she was becoming comfortable. Pip spent the 4 hours sitting next to me in the co-pilot seat, watching the stars. At some point he reached over and put one small hand on my arm and left it there, and I did not move in case moving would end it. I made contact with a legal collective on Meridian Station that specializes in non-compact species rights. The lawyer I spoke with was brisk and practical, and said it would be a long road. I said I was aware of that. She said I should understand that there were no guarantees. I said I understood that too. She asked what my relationship to the subjects was. I thought about it for a moment. I said crew. There was a pause. Then she said she would file the preliminary papers. That night, Pip fell asleep in a hammock I rigged from cargo net and 2 bungee cords in the corner of the cargo bay. It was not elegant. He slept in it like it was the most comfortable bed in the galaxy. Vel sat at the cargo bay entrance with her back to the wall and her forearms glowing that quiet blue-green, and she watched the stars through the small porthole with an expression I did not have a word for, except that it looked like something that had been held very tightly for a very long time, beginning, slowly, to open. I bought a junk ship. I got a crew. The galaxy, I have found, is not particularly interested in your plans. It is, however, occasionally willing to give you something better.